On September 21st, 2025, me and my dad got up super early. As I'm sure you saw in the intro, there was a specific reason why. The RHMA's Quad City rocket, powered by UP Centennial DDA-40X 6936. This thing has had a pretty crazy history, being built in 1971, being only one of 45 Centennials built, and with a staggering 6,600 horsepower, it was certainly a workhorse on the UP, until eventually it was taken out of service in 1985, and then it was made part of the excursion fleet, luckily. It did crash into a dump truck in 2000. That was not fun, but it was repaired and repainted into the awful-looking modern Union Pacific scheme in 2002. Its last excursion with UP was in 2015 before it was donated to RHMA in 2022, was restored and repainted back to its original condition in 2024, and now in 2025, it's finally running its first public excursions since it was owned by the RHMA. And as you can probably tell, I was very excited. And so that's why me and my dad were driving out to Silvis super early on this September morning. It was about a 4-hour drive before we finally arrived in the railroad town of Silvis, Illinois, in the Quad Cities. An interesting thing was we actually had to pass over the Rock River, the same river that Rock Island is named after. And don't worry, we'll be seeing plenty of Rock Island memorabilia in this video. After that, we approached the RHMA, formerly NREX's, Silvis Shops. Now, as you can see by this Google Maps overhead picture, Silvis Shops is massive. And as we pulled up, there was no sign of the Centennial because it was way far back in the yard. But what we did see was a moving Iowa Interstate freight building its train. Normally, I would have just waited for the train to reverse into the yard. However, I was told by some other rail fans two things. One, it had already gone far past the point where the power would be going back in and out of the yard while doing its yard movements. And two, the leader was Iowa Interstate 516, the Rock Island Tribute Unit. And they also told me that there was a gravel road that led out to where they thought the units would be. We decided to take it, and eventually we found the two units, 505 and the Tribute Unit 516, on the head end of freight CRBI working the yard in Silvis. Unfortunately, once we got there, they moved away pretty quickly, and I thought they were actually going to leave the yard and they had finished switching. Fortunately for me, they were still far away from being done with their switching, and after not too much waiting, the train reversed back into the yard and I got to see the two Iowa Interstate GEVOs roll by. Now, Iowa Interstate obviously runs the former route of the Rock Island, and this is actually one of two Rock Island units they have. This one is a tribute unit, which means it wears Rock Island paint, but as you can see, it has Iowa Interstate logos and text. Still a pretty cool unit, though, and we would eventually see the other one, 513, later in the day. But after it reversed into the yard, as I said, it was still far done from switching, and so it rolled past us again, this time going forwards. After that, the train started reversing again, and I was going to get this cool low angle, but, the train stopped before it rolled by where I was set up, which was kind of upsetting. And before I could even get back up to plan the next shot, the train started rolling back the other way, fully screwing over my sitting down low angle shot. By this point, it was past 10 a.m., the time that the Centennial was supposed to leave. So I headed back to the car to check up on heritage units to see if anyone had reported it. And that's why I wasn't able to get my low down angle shot for this shot, as I was standing over by the car. Either way, I still like this shot. Panning farther away made it look pretty good. And when it came back a few minutes later, I made sure I was prepared to get my awesome low angle shot, which is definitely my favorite shot I got of 516. As I said, though, this was past the time where the Centennial was supposed to be departing, so we made our way back towards the shops to investigate, stopping briefly to take some pictures of the awesome NREX power parked out in Silva's shops, including an XSU unit, which is pretty cool, as well as this unit, which I think is an X-Conrail, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways, we were, just talking to the guys that were at the entrance to where you would buy tickets for the train to see if they knew when the Centennial was coming, and, well...
Come on, people.
There it is.
Come on, people.
I can hear it. I can hear the engine hum. There it is.
The excursion, officially symboled Iowa Interstate XSIBU, totally jump-scared us from behind 516's train. We blasted down a different gravel road to see if we could make it to the first crossing before the Centennial did. However, we stopped to see 516 on the way and got this very awesome footage of the excursion passing it. I was the only one on this gravel road, so I think I'm the only one who got a footage of this meet. Very cool. I like this shot a lot. And as we start accidentally pacing the train down this road, we can see that Iowa Interstate 513, the proper Rock Island Heritage unit, is actually trailing on the excursion behind the Centennial. A very nice surprise. I only found out about this unit's involvement a day before the excursion, and it was a very nice bonus to go along with the Centennial. We did manage to beat them to this crossing on 1st Street, where we got a shot of them rolling by at very slow speed. However, as we left First Street, we realized just how much of a nightmare this chase was going to be. There were so many rail fans set up at the crossing, and as we were leaving, we got stuck behind most of them, and I tragically missed a shot of the train going over that Rock River bridge you saw earlier in the video. However, we did manage to make it with relative ease to this crossing on Cleveland Road in Canola, Illinois, where we saw the train rolling around this nice curve, and at this point it was still going at a slow speed, a factor that would give us false confidence later on. However, in Kelowna, the line actually splits into two, and not knowing what line the train would take, we guessed wrong. We ended up on a wild goose chase through Canola and eventually ended up at this crossing, only to hear the sound of the train blowing its horn at a different one. We got even more lost in Canola because, man, this place is confusing, and it took us another 10 minutes to get back out on the road, which put us way behind. We went down Highway 6 and eventually ended up in Geneseo, Illinois, and I thought for sure that we had beaten the train here with how fast we had been going and how slow the train had been going earlier. But when we arrived in Geneseo, it was nowhere to be seen, and we soon got a Heritage News report saying that it had been there 2 minutes ago. We jumped back in the car, headed back onto the highway, and after way too long of stressing about the fact that I might have completely missed the train and wouldn't get any more shots, we finally saw the Legion of Foamers up ahead and knew that we were on the right track. And very soon after that, we caught a glimpse of the very beautiful sight of Iowa Interstate XSIBU in the distance, as we slowly started to gain. As you can see, the train is going a lot faster now, and was pushing 50 miles an hour in some sections. This is a lot faster than most normal excursions, but considering that this is, a main line, they can go pretty fast. However, despite that speed, all the foamers wanted to overtake the train, and because of that, even with the immense traffic ahead, we eventually finally did overtake it. And just as we were overtaking it, I noticed this bridge on Google Maps, what looked like a wooden trestle over a river. We pulled off as soon as the bridge came into view, and I ran out of the car and across the road with way too many foamers on it to get this glorious shot of the train rolling over the trestle over Mud Creek. This is definitely my favorite shot from the whole trip. Because this spot was so good, I actually stuck around to film the coaches going over the river. The consist of this excursion being made up of some Union Pacific Streamliner coaches and Pennsylvania P70 coaches, with the Streamliner coaches owned by RHMA, and as you can see by the logos on the side, the P70s owned by Iowa Interstate. There's also a gray generator car, a UP end car, and a dark green end car. 」 . 。  . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 . 」 Of course, stopping there for that shot put us way behind and took us all the way till we reached Mineral, Illinois, passing the Iowa Interstate yards, to finally catch a glimpse of the train once again. It took way longer this time to overtake the engines, as we presumed there was a couple people pacing, which slowed down the entire legion of foamers behind them. It took, I would say, a solid 15 minutes of just staring at the coaches before we finally overtook the two units, just as we made it to Sheffield, Illinois. We stopped at this crossing on the curve right before Highway 6 went away from the tracks to get my only shot of the whole trip with the train at speed. After that, the traffic got really bad as there was a couple stop signs up ahead. But it didn't really matter because since Highway 6 had stopped paralleling the tracks, there was nowhere we could possibly go fast enough to catch up with the train, as the tracks turned south while Highway 6 turned north. Our only option now was to drive all the way to the train's final destination, Bureau Junction, Illinois. We were confident the train would have already been sitting at the station there by the time we made it. It wasn't. In fact, it hadn't even come into the city yet. And because of that, we found ourselves at this crossing right at the edge of Bureau Junction, just in time to see the train come into the town. After filming the train at that crossing, I actually noticed this Iowa Interstate GP38-2 farther down into the yard where the Y was, so I decided to walk over towards it to get some better shots. And as the train was going so slow, I ended up being halfway there by the time the end of it passed. I nabbed my 2 shots of Iowa Interstate 702 while I was over here. However, just as I was about to cross the tracks to move over to the station, I noticed the train actually reversing on the other leg of the Y through the trees. Now with the train parked at the depot, we decided to head over there. The Bureau Junction depot is not a functional depot, it's very decrepit actually, but the passengers were having lunch here. When we got there, the train was actually blocking the crossing, but it wasn't too long before it started up and cleared the road.
No big deal.
Now that the train is moved, we get a good look at the Bureau Junction depot and just how run down it is. Hopefully it'll be restored one day so that way more excursions like this can be run to it. After that, the train sat there for an hour and a half while the passengers ate lunch and it prepares for the return trip. Since I wasn't on the train and wasn't eating, I just sat there and talked to a bunch of other rail fans. And actually, I met someone who has subscribed to me on YouTube. Never thought that would happen. Shout out to Cedar Lakes Rail Fanner. You were awesome. Either way, 1.5 hours later, the train finally reversed back over the crossing to turn around on the Y for the return trip. Since it was now on the return trip, the train symbol actually changed. No longer was it XSIBU, now it's XBUSI. If you haven't figured it out yet, the SI stands for Silvis and the BU stands for Bureau Junction. With the train now having cleared the switch to go onto the west leg of the Y, me and Cedar Lakes Rail Fanner headed over to the depot on the other side so we could get a shot of the train passing by it. And I got another photo showing not only the depot but a bunch of people sitting next to it trying to get a slightly different shot from the one I was going for. After not too long, we heard the RS3L of the Centennial rounding the corner, and we got our final shot of the day of the largest diesel locomotive in the world, leading its first public excursion in 10 years, past the Bureau Junction, Illinois depot. The train was now on its way back to Silvis, and I would have followed the return trip if it wasn't going away from home. Bureau Junction was like a third of the way across Illinois anyway, and I wasn't going to backtrack all the way to Silvis only to have to go all the way back later. So I had planned from the start only to chase the eastbound run. I will admit I wasn't super happy with all the shots I got on this excursion. I was kind of forced to do the more obscure shots because there were just way too many people trying to get the more well-known and popular shots. But at the very least, I did get a bunch of shots that nobody else did. It was pretty cool on this excursion if I'm going to be honest, but man, the large amount of foamers made it certainly a headache. But the Centennial and the 513 are definitely very nice units, and I'm glad I got to see them, even if I only got way fewer shots than I was expecting and hoping for. But yeah, that's the end of this video. Not much else to say, despite this being, like a big excursion. I don't know. I guess this is the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to come back next time for more rail fanning videos just like this one, and catch those units while you can, especially the really, really big Chungus diesels, and I will see you in the next video.